Wi-Fi and everything.
Check, 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 check. Okay.
Yes.
Thank you.
Testing, testing. Can you hear it through the mic? You can? Okay. Thank you.
great conference yesterday, very exciting stuff. So we're very happy this morning. We've got Mr. Tom Schwartz with us today from the Academy, who's going to be presenting. Just a couple of housekeeping things. We do have the sheets on the table with the QR codes if you scan those, and then that will take you to a survey monkey where you put your survey in. You'll get credit for CEUs if you need CEUs that way also. So with that, I'll go ahead and turn it over to Tom.
Yeah, and I go by Dean. My first name's Thomas, so anytime they ask for a first name, that ends up on the paper. But I actually go by Dean Schwartz. I am with the Academy. We are a agency that provides training and consultation to providers of any sort. And we've been doing that for years now. We're located in the Cincinnati area. I know in your program, it has my email address, but you can also find the Academy at the Academy for the number 4 dsp.com. We do a lot of different types of trainings and stuff. This is just a short intro to trauma and resilience. We do half day and full day trainings on trauma and resilience, but we wanted to give you guys just a taste of some of that information. Just to give you a quick background on me, this is my 37th year in the field. I've worked as a Q for the state. I've been a program manager for day programming. I've worked in schools, and I'm currently a behavior specialist for a county board, as well as doing my work with the Academy. What I want to start with today is just a quick show of hands. How many of you are familiar or had training in trauma and resilience before? All right, so the majority of the people we have here have. That's great. We're going to just touch on a few things. How many of you have heard the name Mary Vicario? Sarah Buffy? Okay. Sarah and Mary are definite mentors of mine. We've worked together now for years, and I love to, you'll see some of the quotes and references come from some of the stuff that Mary and Sarah have done in the past. And you can do the next slide, please. So we usually say we've got 3 guiding principles. We call this training Connect training, and you'll see through the course of the training why it's called Connect training. But 3 guiding principles when we're supporting people. Dignity and respect, no matter how that person is acting. Meeting the needs of the person that you're dealing with. And we want to look at short-term needs, immediate needs, and long-term needs. And then third, we believe very strongly it's right to maintain safety for everyone involved. So you'll see some references here as we go through things on strategies about helping assist people that have experienced trauma and establishing resilience. But these work for everyone. This is not a developmental disability training. This is not a mental health training. This is a human being training. So you'll see a lot of focus on that. Next slide, please. Yeah, we can go through that. All right. So you've heard this saying before, if you do what you have always done, and you can go to the next slide, you'll get what you've always gotten. For the longest time, I told you I've been in this field for 37 years. I'm going to be totally honest. I didn't know better 30 years ago. I didn't understand trauma like we understand it now. So I can look back at a career that I love and that I hope I do many more years in the future and say that I have re-traumatized people. I have slipped up and done things that might have brought that trauma to the forefront for them again.
I'm sorry, what
And
were
I
you saying?
think many of us can say that experience because we just didn't know.
If you
you
have
can
some a little extra, I might not mind that.
So
But
the
you
old
probably need
days,
it more than I do, honey, so.
how we supported
I'm good.
people and behavior support, and you can just bring up all these pictures if you would. We were reactive in our responses. And you're going to recognize some of these. We used punishment. We called it consequences at times, but we used punishment. Shame and blame. And then the big one over here in the corner, and I don't know why you can't see it very well, the labeling. I'm just going to say a couple of comments here, and you tell me if you've ever heard this. He's a biter. He's a runner, right? This is how we responded to people. We labeled them based off of their behavior. Well, what we know now about trauma and trauma experiences, and this is the ICF track, but this works for anyone. We know that many of the people we work with, by nature of their disability, by nature of their experiences, they've got a significant trauma history, right? So even if they don't have trauma history, resilience is effective and supportive, but knowing what we know about the people that we support and serve, this is even more important. So as we move through this, you'll see what we're talking about. You can go ahead to the next slide, please. So I'm going to ask you guys today to do something that's very hard for us human beings, and that's stay away from judgment of how people behave, how people respond, and engage curiosity. If you use curiosity to look at people's behavior and their responses, you're going to be able to kick in that empathy, and you're going to be able to provide what that person needs to be successful and to be resilient. But we like to fall into judgment. Our brain likes to put things in a nice square box so that we can try to understand and comprehend it. We're going to try to not do that today. So let's go to the next slide. So some of you have probably seen this already, and I know, how many people do we have virtually right now? 14 other virtually. If they want to put anything in the comment or anything like that, and you think it's important that we address it, please let me know. Same for you here, if anybody has a question. Okay, in 1998, this really was kicked off. These ACEs were kicked off by Dr. Folletti. They were doing a study, and they found these 10 ACEs. We're not going to go into heavy detail about these, but you can look here and you can see abuse, neglect, and household dysfunction, what people have experienced. We do know, statistics say, that the people that we support in the developmental disability field experience these at a very high rate. Whether it's in systems or it's in the family model, they experience a lot of these. What this really triggered, if you look at the next slide, please, is we see these results carry through in people's lives all throughout their lives. If it happens early on, many of these things are likely or more likely to happen. Like I said, we want to really talk about resilience today, but we just had to lay a little bit of the foundation on trauma. So you can see some of these experiences here: diabetes, depression, heart disease, cancer. So physical issues, mental issues, adaptations in the way people cope, all occur from trauma experiences. Now, all of us, everybody in this room has probably had trauma experiences in our lives too, some more than others. What we know is people move through these experiences and progress and even thrive when they have what is called resilience. So as we go through a few more of these slides, we're going to talk about some things that really promote resilience. And you can move to the next slide, please. So, breaking down trauma, we know trauma impacts our entire being. Trauma is not just in the mind, it's in the body. It comes out, most of you have heard of Bessel van der Kolk's book, The Body Keeps the Score. If you haven't, it's a great book to look at. But brain and body is affected. What we experience in childhood has a profound effect on our lives. And all of us can speak to that. We can learn positive strategies that help us with those experiences and our trauma. And the good news is it is possible to overcome trauma through resilience. So if you'll move to the next slide, please. So I don't know if any of you have read Karen. I really highly recommend reading some of the information that she's put together. But she says everyone has a right to have present and future that are not completely dominated and dictated by the past. There's not a person in this room that hasn't had our future and our present impacted by our past, right? And that's whether we've had a storied trauma history or one with less of those experiences. We want to try to set up an environment and an experience for the people that we support and provide services for that mitigates this and helps them have a future that's bright and a quality of life that is better than what it is today. next slide, please. You're going to see some quotes in here. I absolutely love some of the people that are in here, so I put a lot of quotes in. We talked a little bit earlier about shame and blame being used. What we don't need in the midst of struggle is shame for being human. One of the things that we do in our half-day trainings and our full-day trainings is we really break down this a little bit more. It's important for us to understand that the responses that we are seeing from the people we support, although they may have storied histories, they may have challenging backgrounds, they may exhibit behaviors that we are significantly concerned about, that may harm themselves or others. Even though those experiences are occurring, we need to understand those are human experiences. We struggle to cope. They struggle to cope. And if we look at that with curiosity, and the word that we use a lot of the times, or I guess the sentence that we use is just, I wonder what is so important or so significant that they need to respond in this way. So instead of judging, he hit someone, he threw something, he cursed, he eloped or ran away. If we look at that and with that curiosity, we're going to be able to tap into that empathy that we have, and we're going to be able to look subjectively and objectively at what the person's behavior is. You can go ahead and move to the next slide. So anybody here ever heard of David Petoniak? Great, great. I highly recommend, if you just do a search on the internet, David Petoniak. He's been to Columbus and the Cincinnati area multiple times. In the field of developmental disabilities, just a remarkable human being. And David says that struggles that we see people have, and like I said, we can use this for any human being, are often a direct result of unmet needs. And you can go ahead and click. So he says, in a sense, these difficult behaviors and struggles are messages which tell us things we need to know about the person and their quality of life. These behaviors we see that we are so concerned about, and I told you I'm a behavior specialist by trade, are adaptations. And you'll see that in future slides. But we have to keep that in mind as we're supporting people. People attempting to cope and get through their day. And you can move to the next slide. And there's David's name in case anybody wants to write that down. All right, you can go ahead and click. There's just a couple of things that are going to come up to the top. And that's going to show a couple of times. So you can click again through that. Yeah, one more time. All right, the reason I put this slide in is it's just important to know chronic stress. I mean, because some of us in this room may say, well, I don't have a storied traumatic history. I didn't have that experience. Chronic stress does the same things to our body as trauma. And I deny that anyone in this room right now can say that they haven't been experiencing chronic stress. Between COVID, between our jobs and our efforts to try to support people who have significant needs, we are under chronic stress. Parenting, I could go on and on. Anything we do pretty much right now. You can move to the next slide, please. So that's why I was saying that this works for anyone. We do, in our trainings, we also do self-care, not only for the people that we support, but we do self-care training for employees. Organizational trauma is just as significant in our field. So we want to make sure that we support our staff as well. That's why this training leads into that. Eliana Gill, another person that I highly recommend reading, she says, everything that an abused person does after the abuse is designed to give them a sense of safety. We're all trying to find that comfort and that safety. And many of us, some of us in this room, in addition to the people we support, will go through some pretty extreme measures to get that safety, right? So if we can help people feel safe, then we can see that their behavior may also mimic that safety. Let's move to the next slide. So trauma-informed approach, and and some of you have probably seen this slide before, I'm sure, and you can go ahead and there should be 3 bullets there, yeah. Like I said, I told you I was going to be honest today, and I've been doing this for 37 years and I've screwed up before. I can tell you when I started in this field at age 17, I started working in a group home. When people exhibited behaviors that was harmful to others, and when people exhibited behavior that was harmful to themselves, I didn't say, what happened to you? My response was, what's wrong with you? Or frankly, what the hell was that for, right? I mean, I was shocked. I was not prepared for those type of behaviors at 17. And now we need to understand that when these trauma experiences, chronic stress, autism spectrum disorder is another thing that really mimics the effects of this. These symptoms or behaviors that we see are actually adaptation to that trauma. How many people here, and I know some of you, who's in residential? Okay, so we got quite a few people in residential. Even though we know that the people that we work with have had some pretty traumatic experiences, at some point in time, we're busy, we're doing what we're doing, and they exhibit a behavior like hoarding, or they exhibit a behavior like elopement. And we respond strongly about, why is he doing that? He can have all the food in this house. Why would he still be hoarding? That is us using our judgment and not our curiosity. Because if we look and use that curiosity, we're going to see that this person does not feel safe, and they've probably had a neglect history, right? We know that when we can keep our thinking brains online, but oftentimes we're reactive. So we really encourage proactivity, and I'll show you some steps on that in a little bit. Yeah.
The problem is we often have our staff at the baseline PSP
Yes.
have their own trauma.
Yes,
And that
absolutely.
person's trauma is triggering the PSP's trauma. It's never dealt with their trauma. It's a big ugly domino mess.
No, absolutely. And the only way that I've found that really gets through that is if you use these trauma-informed strategies, and I've got a few in here, is when staff start seeing, the results, then they start buying onto that, So, I mean, and it's hard because you're right. We all do have our own traumas. I'm working with a family right now that grandma has a sexual abuse history. And the young man that I work with is exhibiting some sexual characteristics, saying certain things. Grandma, when her thinking brain is on and sits down with me, she says, Dean, I know I shouldn't have responded that way. I know I shouldn't have said that to him when he did that. You've taught me what I need to do to be, help him. But unfortunately, she said, when he says it, I go offline and then I say, I'm afraid, and I respond the way I do. So to help grandma, we've really done a lot of role play. We've done a lot of, work on the front end to try to help keep her online so that we can then have her use the strategies that are necessary. Healing happens in relationships. If there's anything you walk out of here today with, just walk out of here with that. It's the relationship, and the reason we call this class Connect that we do, these trainings that we do are called Connect, is because that above all else, if you can connect with another person, that is what's going to make a difference in people's lives. And helping them to connect with as many safe people as possible is what's going to improve that quality of life. You want to move to the next slide, please? So we're going to talk briefly about safety, and I'm just going to ask, and if anybody throws up anything interesting in chat, please share if you would. But what is safety to you? Just anyone who would want to share. What is safety? And there's no wrong answer here, so you can't get it wrong. So, and not everybody at once. Sleep, right? Yeah, feeling safe enough to sleep, right? That's safety. Anyone else?
Being yourself.
Being yourself, not having to hide who you really are. Wonderful answer. And you'll see how that fits into exactly what we're talking about here in a minute. How about one more? Yeah.
Knowing that you're not going to re-experience the trauma, feeling that this isn't going to happen to you.
Absolutely. We have a young lady that we worked with that the family is really trying very, very hard to support her, foster her. And she was triggered the other day simply by a smell. Nothing that they could really control, nothing that they had a plan on, but they thought they had set up the environment to to be very successful for her, and a simple smell triggers her to the point where she just had a total meltdown. So yes, trying to know that you're not being re-traumatized. So let's move to the next slide. You've probably seen some of this. Sandra Bloom, who does the sanctuary model, came up with these 4 domains of safety, and there should be 4 that pop up there. One of the things that we want to make sure that we're aware of when we're trying to help people is we're driven to want to help keep people be safe, right? I mean, that's our jobs. Everyone in here, your job is the people that you support and work with, keeping them safe. Sometimes we assume that because that's our job and our focus, that the person should feel safe. But when we have trauma histories and we have experiences like some of the people we work with do, just saying you are safe, and what's your name? Andrea, you're safe, isn't necessarily going to do it, right? I mean, I'm here to keep you safe, Andrea, you're safe. That doesn't necessarily work for Andrea. She has to feel it in her body. Remember, trauma is in the body. Resilience has to be in that body too. So we need to look at all 4 domains, and we won't break these down in heavy detail for today, but all 4 domains of safety to try to help the people we support, to try to help our employees, and to try to help ourselves, our families, feel safe. The physical is the one that most people default to. When someone says, you know, hey, I'm not feeling safe here, most people assume or think about the physical. Well, no one's going to hurt you. No one's going to hit you, those type of things. The other 3 can get much more complex. Psychologically, we're talking about mental health issues. I saw statistics not too long ago that in our DCs, I actually worked for Southwest Ohio DC back in the 90s, which tells you how old I am. But, that the individuals that we serve in our DCs, about 70% of them have co-occurring mental illnesses. The statistics for just America wide is about 40% compared to 20% for the neurotypical population, if you want to use that term. I hate that term, but so there's a lot of psychological issues that come with this trauma and this experience that people struggle with. Social, all I got to do is say one thing and everyone here is going to tap into how social safety can be an issue. Middle school. Am I right? Middle school, I want to fit in. I want to be a part of something. I want to be in this group or this group. I want, a significant other, I want to date. All those things that people go through in middle school and how unsafe we felt doing that. Many of the people that we work with, David Petoniak, who I told you before, coined the term. He said, loneliness is the only real disability, and it's a killer. And I want you to think about that. Many of the people we support and work with, we can surround them with one-on-one staff and people all over the place, and they're still not connected. That trying to get that connection piece. So, and then moral, we talked about the shame and blame. Mary Vicario, who I mentioned at the beginning of this training, in her training, she talks about spot theory, if you want to look into that. But basically a summary of spot theory, SPOT theory, is that the emotional pain harms us and does the same thing to us as physical pain. And the difference is physical pain releases endorphins that helps us get through the pain, and emotional pain doesn't. So literally the saying, sticks and stones may break my bones, but words will never hurt me, is totally incorrect. Words will harm more than anything. And we know that we work with people who have had punitive words, negative words, derogatory words used with them and against them. Next slide, please. So another thing, if you want to take away something, people don't act safe unless they feel safe. If something happened in this room right now that made people feel unsafe, you're not going to act safe. You're going to hit that door as quick as you can. You're going to do whatever you need to try to do to survive. That is just a human response. So if we help people feel safe, we will see these challenging behaviors that we work with get better. Next slide, please. So why do we need to know those 4 aspects or domains of safety? Well, if our responses address all forms of that safety, and we start considering that, we literally use those 4 domains as like a checklist. If I see Johnny struggling, I'm going to go, are there any physical safety concerns for Johnny right now with my team? And Johnny. And then I'm going to go, are there any psychological concerns? And I'm going to talk with Johnny about that. I'm going to talk with the team, and I'm going to go down those 4. And that helps us kind of focus in on where do we need to target our interventions and our supports. If it's a social safety issue, there's things we can do to help with that, right? But we can target that instead of just doing the shotgun blast method of, let's try to set up a token economy system, or let's try to set up something that could be punitive. And if we know people won't act safe until they feel safe, then it's important that we establish the feeling of safety in everyone present, including ourselves. And I know everyone in this room knows that. The first person that has to be calm and relaxed when we're dealing with people who are struggling with these challenging behaviors related to trauma is ourselves. Because if we're not regulated, there's no way we can help someone else regulate. Next slide, please. So with this trauma-informed approach, okay, we're just going back to that again. Remember, what happened to you is what we're going to start asking instead of what's wrong with this person. Remember that these behaviors are adaptation to try to survive the events that happened, and then healing happens in relationships. And you can move to the next slide, please. So how many people have heard of the hand brain before? All right, so we've got a few. Would you have asked them if they would raise their hands in chat if they've heard of the hand brain? So I just want to get an idea of how many people. So Dan Siegel, people have heard of Dan Siegel before. If you haven't, look up Dan Siegel. Wonderful information for the people that we support. He's a child psychologist, and he teaches about the brain all the time. And he got tired, really, of carrying around the brain model. Everybody's seen those brain models that come apart. It's probably about this big around. So he came up with what's called the hand brain. And I'm going to show you very short and succinctly the hand brain. And we're going to talk about why that's important with the people we support, and frankly, with anyone. And we'll start here. All right. Imagine this is my central nervous system, your central nervous system. So from wrist to elbow. We've all got one, right back there. The important thing to know about this when we're talking about the brain is the vagus nerve. Anyone here heard of the vagus nerve before? All right, good. This vagus nerve is important because it's responsible for all of our feelings, right? When we feel something, the vagus nerve is involved, and it connects to every single organ in our body. So when you get those butterflies before you go do something, when you get the goosebumps, when you're, those type of things are a result of the vagus nerve. Sitting on top of this central nervous system, right here where my palm is referred to, and you can click to the next slide if you would, because we'll address that here in a minute too. But that on the palm, that's our brain stem. That brain stem is responsible for all the automatic functions that we have. So it's responsible for breathing, our heart beating, arousal, blinking, all the things that we don't have to think about at all. Now, this is where it gets a little interesting. You can see the picture up there. We're going to use my thumb in the middle of our brain, in there, enclosed by everything, is the limbic system and a thing called the amygdala. And we're going to use my thumb to represent the amygdala. That is our smoke detector, our alarm system in our body. Its total function, most important part of it, is safe or unsafe. Now, what we know, and the reason this is important, is if someone is on the autism spectrum, if someone's under chronic stress, if someone has experienced PTSD or trauma, significant trauma, this amygdala becomes overactive, right? Because it's trying to help, its job is to help us survive, safe or unsafe. Right now, all of your senses, everybody in this room is taking in all the information that's going on in here, the temperature, smells, sights, touch, all those things are coming in, and your amygdala is judging safe or unsafe. Now, I hope everyone right now feels safe, right? But some of you may not, depending on what you're perceiving and what you're feeling. So that amygdala says safe or unsafe. If it says safe, right, Then the last part of the brain to develop, which are the cortexes. And like I said, this is a very simplified form, but these cortexes, that's our thinking part of our brain. Why that's important is that also handles empathy, creativity, all those things that we need when someone is struggling or when we're struggling. We need all those things. If the amygdala says safe, then we can use our thinking part of our brain to process this, right? And we can work through our problems. And all of us have done this at one time or another. Something happens, we keep our cool, we work through it, right? But if it doesn't, if the amygdala says unsafe and that thinking part of the brain is not accessed, then we drop back down into the brainstem. And now it's all about survival. And the reason I'm saying that is oftentimes when we see the people we work with do extreme things like harm themselves or harm someone else or try to elope, we often automatically, that judgment that we were talking about, assume that it is a conscious thought on their part. He hit me because he was upset with me or mad at me or whatever. But studies have shown when people have experienced significant trauma or on the autism spectrum or under chronic stress, that oftentimes it's an unconscious brainstem response. So people aren't doing this on purpose. Their brain and the amygdala is saying, you are unsafe, you need to survive, you need to do whatever is necessary to survive. And if you'll move to the next slide, please. All right. So here's the thing, and I can't remember if I put this slide in here or not because I had to condense some stuff down, but I want to break this down for you so you know what I'm talking about here. You know, if you slow down and think about it, you'll know when people are having what we call an amygdala hijack, okay? And that's when the amygdala takes over and the thinking brain goes offline. Because there's two things that will often let us know. And I know you've had this experience before in your life. The first one is when someone does something like that and you go, Johnny, why did you do that? And their response is, I don't know. That means that thinking brain went offline, right? And we've all heard that before, haven't it? We've heard it in our children. We've heard it in our lives of, I don't know why I did it. I did it. That's generally an amygdala hijack, all right? The second one is if we look at the person and see what they're doing and we engage our curiosity and we're like, why would they do that? That doesn't make sense to me. Why did he run across 3 lanes of traffic? Anybody ever had that happen to them with someone they're working with? I see people nodding. That was dangerous. That could have gotten him severely harmed or killed. Why would he do that? I'm telling you, that is more than likely an amygdala hijack. So the person is working subconsciously, not consciously. And they're not concerned about anything other than trying to survive. And if that fight, flight, or freeze response is kicked in and it's saying, you've got to get away from this situation, it doesn't matter that there's 3 lanes of traffic. It's, I've got to do this to survive. So it's not a conscious thought process. Next page, please. So that's that amygdala hijacking that I was talking about. And what will happen when the amygdala says unsafe, we drop down into the brainstem and it's just working it goes back to, some people use this term. I don't necessarily like to use this term, but back to cavemen thinking of just kill or be killed, right? We're trying to survive and we're going to do whatever is necessary. And that's why we see people do some pretty extreme things, is their brain is telling them you could die at any moment. Next slide. So that's what I just mentioned to you. Why or I don't know. Think about this the next time you see someone exhibiting a behavior that is significantly of a concern, and you ask them and they're like, I don't know. And here's what upsets staff more than anything. I want you to think about this. You've had this happen with your staff. Is after this occurrence happens, Johnny comes back and he's like, I'm sorry. I'm sorry that I hit you. I didn't mean to. And what happens when Johnny apologizes is oftentimes we as staff or the person who was hit or whatever is like, see, he knew what he was doing was wrong. The problem is Johnny was offline and he responded subconsciously. Now that the thinking brain's back online, his empathy, That's where it's housed, is in those cortexes, comes back online. And I don't want to see you hurt. I don't want to see you hurt. I'm sorry. But at the time, he didn't have empathy. He didn't have that cognitive process to rationalize what was going on. But that sometimes frustrates our staff even more because, has anybody here taught coping skills before? Right. You sit down and, I'll give you just a quick example. You sit down, Andrea, right? Yeah. Andrea, here's what we're going to do. When something, upsets you, I want you to take 3 deep breaths and count backwards from 10. And we do it. We're going to do it over and over. But guess what? I'm going to do it with you when what? When there's nothing to be concerned about, right? So we practice it with her and we practice it with her. And by the time we've done this over a few months or so, Andrea as soon as I'm like, okay, it's time to sit down and do our coping skills. Andrea's like, okay, 3 deep breaths, 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, got it. And you're like, I did a great job, right? I'm a real good trainer. The problem is we get into a situation that re-triggers her, like we were talking about. The thinking brain goes offline, and where all those nice memories of that coping strategy are out of her access, right? And like I said, this is what upsets us so much is, so she goes through this meltdown, this tantrum, the thinking brain comes back on and we're like, Andrea, what should you have done? And she goes, well, I should have done 3 deep breaths and count backwards from 10. And you're like, see, Andrea, she did it on purpose. She must have done it on purpose because she knows what she should have done, right? It's all the difference in whether your thinking brain is engaged or not. We can go to the next slide, please. Now, this is just Grace LeConte's 4 responses to fear. There are a lot of different versions of this out there. All I want you to do on this slide, we're just going to look at it very briefly because we could break that down more if we had more time. But you can see the fight, flight, freeze, and face responses. Not always do those have to be physical responses. If we're looking at fight, the action could be attack, could be aggression. It can also be an emotion of anger, and it could be someone insulting or blaming someone or mistreating someone verbally in some way. But that could still be a fight response. So their brain is telling them you are at risk. How many of us have before in our past, when we feel like we're being attacked by someone and threatened, what do? We attack back. It might be with words, right? It might be, anger. Secondly, face, that's that trying to get connected. So they might preserve or mitigate or explain away what happened. Freeze, the person may comply. One of the things that we see a lot is how many people, you said residential, we've got quite a few residential people here. The person moves in and things are going great the first couple of weeks and we call it what? They're having a what? All right. Here's the thing about that honeymoon period. What we're finding out now, if you look at it closely, it's more likely a freeze response. They're unsure, it's new, they don't know who to trust, they don't know what to experience. So they're complying and shutting down and not responding the way they feel. Then what happens is after a couple of weeks, they start feeling more comfortable. They've connected with your staff or someone on your staff. And then we start seeing some of these challenging behaviors and we say the honeymoon's over. That's really actually a good sign because it says this person is moving towards trusting and feeling comfortable enough with us. So you want to see the end of that honeymoon stage when you see someone move in. That's the opportunity to move them to the safe part of this. Flight, we all know we've dealt with elopement, we've dealt with things like that, but it can also be denying, sabotaging. Another experience that I see all the time that I think we need to look at a lot differently is we want to help people have great experiences. So we're going to work with them. What's your name? Yeah. What? Will Mary. Okay. Will Mary. We're gonna work. That's my hillbilly coming out too. That's we're gonna work with Johnny, and because Johnny wants to go to a Reds game, Cincinnati Reds game, and I'll say Cincinnati Reds because that's where I'm from down there. Yeah. So he wants to go to a Reds game. He is working towards getting to go to that big game, and we set up everything. We've got everything. We've got tickets. We've got opportunity for him to get an autograph, all those things. And then the day that we are supposed to leave, Johnny has a meltdown, and we've heard the staff say it before. It's almost like he's sabotaging. We've done all this work for him, and it's almost like we're sabotaging, he's sabotaging this trip. What we need to understand is that can definitely be a flight response, right? If, I'm afraid, if I'm concerned, if something has thrown my thinking brain offline, no matter how much I love what that is, and I want to go to the Reds game, if my brainstem is and my amygdala are saying unsafe, then I may do whatever I need to do to get out of that. So we need to just look at those things a little differently. You can move to the next slide, please. I don't know if any of you here have heard of mirror neurons, but very important piece that we need to know. All of us in our brains have these neurons that want to mirror what other people are doing. And the way you can find this out is the next time you walk by someone who is smiling, stop and check yourself real quick, because that is an easy way to know how mirror neurons work. Because oftentimes what happens is we'll walk by them, and the next thing we'll stop and we're like, I'm smiling. Why am I smiling? I don't even know why I'm smiling, but it's because the person that passed by us was. This is great for co-regulation, but it's also one of our biggest problems, because if we aren't regulated, the people that we are trying to help regulate are going to amp up too, because their mirror neurons are going to kick in. Giacomo Rizzolatti, if you get a chance to look up some of his work. But this allows us to co-regulate with people. If we're close enough and we share the right expressions and the right responses, then it'll help us co-regulate with the person. Next slide, please. This is just another one of those little things that, like I said, if we walk out of here today, always connect before we redirect. So if we see someone struggling, if we're trying to help someone, the relationship and the connection should always come first, right? I mean, I do a lot of Zoom trainings, and I'm sure everyone here has now. So we do a lot of Zoom. How do you feel? I mean, tell me the difference in this feeling, because we've all done this. You forget to unmute. Who here has forgotten to unmute on Zoom and started talking? Frankly, I have friends who have won an award for that. We did the Zoomies awards, and I've got a friend that almost always forgets. Actually, I think it's Pete, isn't it? Pete. Rachel Pearlstein. Yes, Rachel always forgets to unmute. So we gave her the Zoomie award, for doing that. But so if you're trying to say something to me, and what's your name? Steve. Steve's trying to say something to me on Zoom, and he forgets to unmute. I want you to just think about the difference of how these, because what do we do sometimes? All of us, several of us that see that, they're like, Steve, you forgot to unmute, and you're, come on, Steve, you know better than that. Or if you connect with the person first before you correct or redirect. If I say, Steve, I know you've got something really important to tell us. If you'll hit the unmute button first, then we'll get to hear that, right? Making a connection before any sort of correction, redirection, or anything like that. I do a lot of training with police officers, and you would be amazed that when we talk about some of these strategies here, how it's foreign to them, but that they really are starting to grasp onto that how this can de-escalate a situation remarkably just by connecting with the person first. Because we've all, if you've ever been pulled over, if the officer walks up and the first thing to do is they're like, do you know why I pulled you over? That doesn't really help us feel very safe, right? But if the officer connects and says, hey, I'm Officer Smith, I'm with the Columbus Police Department, and they start that connection piece before they correct. Next slide, please. Let's talk a little bit about anger. I think people often, anger gets a bad rap. Anger is necessary. Anger is important to us. You can see on the slide here, I'm not going to read all of these, but I think it's important that we understand that anger is a secondary emotion. I've never met a person that's just angry for the heck of it, right? I'm just an angry person. People even say that, but there's no truth to that. It's an important and powerful force in our life, and it tells us that there needs to be a change of some sort. So if we, use that curiosity that we talked about early in the training to, instead of judgment, when we see someone who is angry, then we may have a better opportunity to find out what's going on here. You can move to the next slide, please. So we're going to look at the anger iceberg. You can go ahead and click. There should be maybe 3 or 4 little, yeah, just like that. Thank you. All right. So if we look at this anger iceberg, most of the time what we see is the anger, but underneath there's things like sadness, embarrassment, fear, those type of things. And I'll give you an example of how this works. One of the strongest memories that I have of my son's childhood, 4 years old, we went to the park. We were playing at the park. We had a great day. We were probably there for 2-3 hours, slides, saw the ducks. It's called the helicopter park. We went to the helicopter that was in the park and looked at it. Great day. We go back home. We hit the parking lot to go to the car, and my 4-year-old Jameson jerked his hand out of my hand and ran into the parking lot. And a car almost hit him. I mean, the guy was doing everything he was supposed to do, driving slowly through the parking lot, but my son darted out right in front of him. The guy hits his brakes, and literally, it's probably within this space of hitting my son. I was scared. I was afraid. I felt the big fear, right? I thought I could have lost my son there. How do you think it came out, though? Did it come out as, I'm afraid? How did it come out? Anger. Anger at the guy. I was like, yeah, what the, where are you doing? This guy did everything he was supposed to. Anger at my son. You get over here right now. You don't ever jerk your hand out of your dad's hand. So my son's crying. I'm upset. This guy's mad at me. All of that came out as anger, but the root behind it was fear. And I think what we see a lot is anger from the people that we support, or adaptations to the trauma that we talked about earlier. Yet we look at the anger and all we can focus on is the anger. They can't talk to me like that. I'm not going to be talked to like that. They're not going to, treat me like that, right? What we need to do is look beneath that anger and find out the fear, the sadness, the embarrassment that the person's going through, and work with that. Let's move to the next slide, please. Yeah, just another one there. All right, so we're at the resilience factor section. And how much time do we have? Oh, Lord. Let's move through this then, and I'll just show you some of the things. A lot of this is based on the work of David Petoniak, but some of it is also based on Mary Viccario's work, as I told you guys at the beginning of the training. So the first thing, the resilience factor that we can support people with and offer to people to help them is power and choice. And you can see some of the responses here. The one that I really stick with, and I know you've heard this one before, but power with versus power over. Our staff need to understand that we are with this person in this journey, not over them, not in front of them, not even behind them pushing. We are with them. We are beside them. We all want control over our life. So we've got to give that choice and that power, support them in that, their independence. Next one, please. A sense of value and self-worth. And some of you have seen slides like this before, and I loved, Andrea, I think you brought it up at the beginning under safety about being who you are, right? I think we work with a lot of people, and we've been those people too, but we work with a lot of people that don't necessarily feel safe enough to show who they really are because of our responses. But if we can help people have a strong sense of self, and that's one of the things I like to do, and I know you've seen this activity before, but have you ever seen the identity molecule? It's a quick, easy thing is just think for yourselves here for a moment. Just take 10 seconds and start listing all of your identities. I'll give you an example. I am a father. I'm a softball player. I'm an employee. I'm a brother. I'm a husband. And looking at all those different identities that I have, and what can I do to emphasize those, to be better at those, and then do that activity for yourself and for your staff, and then work on this activity with the people that you support. and see if they're having struggles coming up with who are they, right? Because if we have a strong sense of who we are and what our value is in this world, it helps with our sense of self-esteem and self-worth. And I think sometimes many of the people we work with struggle with that, but we need to be emphasizing in their lives that, you know what, you're a great employee. You're a brother, you're an uncle, you are a artist. You are, all these things that matter to them. And down at the bottom, just as quick at the bottom of the page, service to others is a powerful tool. If you want to build self-esteem, that is a great route to go. Service to others, supporting others. A lot of us are in this field right now because that's the type of person that we are, right? Is we want to help others. If we give the people we support the opportunity to help others too and lift up others, self-esteem will build, that dopamine will flow, and that's what we need to help establish resilience. So next slide, please. We talked about this one, so we won't go into heavy detail. We broke down the 4 domains of safety, but people need to feel safe, right? So what can I do to help people feel safe in all 4 of those domains? And I do encourage, use this as a template of just going through and saying, is this person struggling in the physical domain, the social domain, the emotional, psychological domain, or moral domain? And that can help us target our interventions and our supports. Next slide, please. This is taken directly from David Petoniak, who I told you I absolutely love. But joy in ordinary everyday places. We need to establish what's called affiliation and belonging, connection. And I use the TV show Cheers to represent that. You know the tagline from Cheers, you want to go where everybody knows your name. It feels good to be recognized. It feels good to be known, to be accepted. And we want to help people experience that. What are their interests? And we want them to be of the community, not just in the community, right? I mean, this is something that really frustrates me. And we've been working on this for years and years, but there's still people out there that think if I put the person in a van and take them to Walmart, then I'm doing community inclusion. And the thing is we want people of the community, not just in it, right? It's not about just we took them there. Let's get them connected with people, other people who have like interests and things to do. And that's really an important piece of that joy in ordinary everyday places. I mean, you think about it, yes, I like to go to the Reds games. I enjoy meeting my friends out, but I find a lot of joy in just ordinary places, places that are important to me, right? I mean, I have a place at the local park that I like to go sit on the bench and watch the fish. There's a little pond there. And when I'm struggling, I go there. It doesn't have to be a big trip. It doesn't have to be something that costs money. It's what is important to this person and what meets their needs. So we want to look at that. Next one, please. And we have to teach people, right? David Petoniak's strong on this as well. Giving people opportunities to learn and grow, supporting them in their independence, helping them develop their plan and their life, and we've got the Ohio ISP going on, now we've got person-centered planning that we've been doing for a long time, which are wonderful tools to help with that. But just helping people, I mean, there's too often, I told you, I've been doing this for 37 years. We've wanted, or our staff have wanted people to just say, I just want him to stop that. I just don't want him to do that anymore. But unfortunately, if we don't give people alternatives, people are going to meet their needs, right? So we've got to teach new skills and give new alternatives to be able to do that. Let's move to the next one. And this is one that I feel strongly on. This isn't a direct resilience factor implemented with the people that we support. This is for our staff and for other supporters. And all I say is supports and supporters that are also supported. We need to make sure that we're giving our staff the training that they need to be successful. We need to make sure that we're offering them the opportunity to grow and learn and be resilient in themselves. And that's why I said all of these factors work for everyone. Our staff need to feel safe so they can help the people they support feel safe. And then I've added in here also pets, beliefs, opportunities like that. I don't know about you guys, but if I start thinking about external supports that I have, I immediately go to my 2 Chihuahuas. I got 2 Chihuahua dogs. And those are my, if I've had a bad day at work, I walk in the door, they greet me and they're like, we love you no matter what, right? We need those kind of things in our life too. We need people to lift us up, beliefs and opportunities. It can be spiritual. It doesn't have to be spiritual, but those kind of things. And we need caregivers that are trained, regulated, and rested. And we know we're struggling with that right now. Next slide, please. And then last but not least, and I told you this at the beginning of the training, the most important thing that we can offer the people that we support is meaningful and enduring safe relationships. Are there safe adults in their life? Are there safe adults in your staff's life, in your life? And how can we grow those? I always tease and say that, micro relationships are so important. Some of our closest friends and the people that support us the most are people that we have met in the weirdest of ways. We met them at work. We met them, those type of things. Yes, I like that. So we grow those micro relationships. I mean, I have a micro relationship with my garbage guy. Every Thursday when I leave to go to work Thursday mornings, most of the time he's at my house or right near there. The timing is just perfect. And some of you will understand what I mean by micro relationship. I see him, he sees me. I do this. He does this. And then we go our ways. And that's a micro relationship though. There's something I get out of that. Now, if I want to grow that, I've got to take a chance, right? Or he's got to take a chance. I could go over. He's always wearing a Cincinnati Reds hat. I could go over and say, hey, the Reds, it looks like we're going to lose Castellanos, but, we still got, thank you. We still got, these guys, we could still have a really good year. It's up to him whether he's going to facilitate that and help with that too, right? He could go, I'm sorry, I'm really busy right now. Or he could start talking to me about the Reds. And who knows, a few months down the line, if we're not at a Reds game together, hanging out and have become friends. But we have to make an effort. And sometimes I think we're afraid that people are going to fail. So it's like if they make that effort and they get turned down, but there is dignity in that risk. There's dignity in making that extra connection. So we've got to help people get into situations where they can grow those micro relationships. Next slide, please. All right, we'll skip that one. So Amy Banks, we'll back up one if you would. Amy Banks, great person if you check her out. She says, connection is our greatest need and disconnection is our greatest fear. And we're running out of time, so we're going to stop on this slide. In the PowerPoint presentation are some strategies on how to deal with this, right? How to help establish resilience. I know that when I was talking with OPRA earlier, my email address is in the manual, in your catalog, course catalog. Please feel to reach out to me if you have any questions about what I've talked about today or the strategies, because I would be happy to talk with you through those strategies and how they might be helpful in what you do. I want to give just a couple of moments if anybody had any questions. Yeah.
Just a quick question. Does Dave Petoniak have a book? I'm trying to look for it.
Petoniak, no, he's got a website. It's called D Imagine. So the letter D, Imagine. He loves the Beatles and John Lennon. So dimagine.com. But it's a fabulous website. Yes.
And someone know the book that you referred to for Brene Brown.
Brene Brown, I think that one is called Shameless, I believe. But if you look up that quote, it'll tell you which book it came out of. Yeah.
You may not be able to answer it that quick, but so if someone's offline, do you not interact with them, then let them get through that because they can't absorb what you're trying to help them?
Ruth, it really depends. It really depends. Now, what we can do, and we weren't really able to go into a lot of detail with it, is to get someone back online. A lot of these strategies that I listed will help bring them back online, but we want to use visual components anytime that we can, because the one thing that'll cross from the amygdala into the thinking part of the brain is the visual. So a lot of words, that's why we encourage not to use a lot of words at that time. But if we can incorporate visuals, that'll help possibly bring that thinking brain back online so that they have empathy and reasoning. Any other questions? Well, I know that was a whirlwind. I didn't really preface that we, like I said, we typically do this training in 4 or 8 hour increments. So, but we would love to hear from you. Reach out to me if you have any questions or anything that we can support with. If you think your agency could benefit from the self-care training that I talked about, the trauma-informed training, or any of the strategies, please just reach out to me and we can definitely arrange something. Thank you very much.